Welcome to another episode of Character Modeling with me, Steve Moore. And yeah, this week we are going to look at bump maps. And now, the old school traditional way of making bump maps is to hand paint them. You go into Photoshop and you paint a grayscale map. There's a better way to do that. And also, I think, I'll admit that for me, for quite a while, bumps are a bit of a mystery. I mean, on the surface, it's a pretty easy thing. You make a height map and then use that as an alpha channel to paint detail onto your model. But, you know, for example, I'd have trouble with the model getting distorted, getting things to tile correctly, blending bump maps and stuff. So we're going to take a deep look at bump maps and making them via the depth channel in ZBrush. So we're not going to hand paint them. We're going to do something a little different here. And at the end of the show, I like always, I have a little Easter egg. I got a bunch of questions from my friend and subscriber JD, and so we're going to take a look at I'm going to answer more of his questions and a couple more of your comments too. I've a bunch more subscribers since the last video, so thank you so much to everyone who subscribed. And with that, let's get into it. So what we're going to do today in regards to bump maps is to generate our height map from some sculpted geometry. So what we're going to get here is a mathematically perfect height map based on kind of three-dimensional geometry, as opposed to faking it, you know, in Photoshop. So here we go. I'm not going to make you guys sit through me sculpting this stitch detail in ZBrush, because the point of the exercise today is, once you've got your sculpted detail, you know, how do you turn that into a nice height map? And then, you know, how do you make that tile? And ultimately, how do you create and save off your new brushes in ZBrush, and, you know, set up various parameters so that we can get the results we want in ZBrush. Having said that, let's just do a quick flyby of some key points I should mention. So the very first thing, I would say almost always, is I needed some good reference for those stitch edges. I found a real jacket and I took a bunch of pictures of the details I thought I would need. In particular, I'm looking for the edges, you know, the stitch edges on a leather jacket. And so and here's some nice detail of you know, how a zipper is framed, a little more subtle stuff. So I took some nice high-res pictures of jackets and then proceeded to Maya. And the reason for this is I wanted to create a nice plane, you know, like a plane with some UVs to sculpt on, and I just thought Maya was the easiest place to do that. So you just got to create polygon in plane here, and you get a plane, you know, nice little square subdivided plane. You can specify the number of subdivisions, and it comes with UVs already, which is perfect. UVs 0 to 1, exactly what we need. And so just to show you guys, so I got my plane here, and I made some stitches too, right? So I modeled some stitches out of a torus. Turn the plane off for a minute. They're just you know, that was very simple. And the reason for the UVs, if I turn off the wireframe for a sec, was so I could then go into Photoshop and sketch. You know, I just made little stitch hole mask, right? So there we have, you know, a plane with our stitch holes, kind of based on the UVs, very simple, and some modeled stitches, and that was the foundations. I took all this into ZBrush. Now, the one thing I want to point out for our demo today, I'm going to include the stitches themselves in the brush because I think it's kind of more interesting visually, but I want to emphasize that for the final model, I'm actually going to apply the stitches themselves, these little guys, as an IMM brush, and I'll show you guys how you create an IMM brush and insert mesh brush in ZBrush. The reason we're going to create geometry for our stitches is because Later on, I know that I want to texture this thing in Substance Painter, and if I have the stitches separate, I can apply some poly paint to them, and I can use that to create a mask, to basically render out a mask based on the poly paint data, which we can then take into Substance, and then we can we can treat our stitches and our leather material separately. We can apply a different material to the stitches based on that mask, so we can give them, maybe they're going to be orange stitches and the leather jacket's going to be a different color, and of course it's going to be a leather material, so that's going to be very useful. So just want you to just bear that in mind. Today we'll make a nice bump map and we'll include our stitches because it looks cool. And maybe, if you're just wanting to sculpt a high-res model, you're not fussed about having separate stitches, then this bump map would work great for that. All right, so here we are in ZBrush. So we've got our plane and we've got our stitches here. So I just took the plane, turn off the smooth modifier, and just subdivided the jeebers out of it, a whole bunch of times, and then brought in that texture I showed you a moment ago. So we have a mask here. Here's our stitch holes. So turning off the stitches for a minute and go down to texture map, turn that map on. There you go. I'll turn off the frame there so you can see it better. So once I had that texture in ZBrush, over here in masking, and you come down to mask by color, right, and you can mask by intensity. So the black being the most intense, that will be our mask. So this is very useful for a variety of things in ZBrush, creating masks. You can create masks with poly paint. Of course you can just paint a mask, but I like creating a texture or a poly paint mask because you can go back to it anytime and you can append it and edit it. You're not going to lose it, so that's nice. So I have my stitches masked here, throw in a layer, and then we're going to go down to deformation and inflate here. I'll just turn my stitches back on so I can kind of see, can gauge this stuff, right, and we'll get in a bit closer. So with those little stitch holes masked and under deformation, inflate, we'll give it a bit of inflation here. So let's try, I don't know, try 5. And yeah, it's not too bad. Maybe a little bit too deep. So I'll try 3 instead. And here you go. So now we have our little stitch holes, and now it just starts sculpting on it. Now to sculpt, to build up the stitches, the stitch edges, looking closely at my reference, I did a little poly paint sketch of the creases and turned that into a mask just like we did with the stitch holes, and sculpted around that, a combination of layers and polish, to smooth out the harsh details until finally we get this. Okay, so we want to take the jacket edge and the stitch detail that we sculpted and make it into the perfect bump map, a mathematically correct height map. Now, the very first step, we want this to be, we want to render out a nice high-res image, so we're going to make sure to resize the document. So going over to document here, I'll turn off constraint proportions, and we'll make a nice, like, let's say, the heck, let's make it 3000 by 3000, just for shits and giggles, and click resize. Okay, so now our document is much higher res. We can load up our tool, stitches edge there. Give it a second to load, and click edit right away. As soon as you load that tool, always click edit. I'll tweak the light just because I'm fussy this way. It makes no difference, but I like that dramatic lighting. It's easier to see the detail, right? Now, the thing to be aware of is that this window we see our tool framed in is actually not the entire document. So if you go back up to document and zoom here, what you'll find, if we zoom out, that's the document, right? So it's a bit of a quirk of ZBrush. So this square here represents our 3000 by 3000 pixel document. And we want to frame, we want to fill the whole document with our tool there. And we turn off perspective. And now what we're going to get is a nice big render of this thing. And what we're actually going to do is capture a depth map, right? And the way we're going to do that, there's two ways to do that. The easiest way that ZBrush is set up for us is under Alpha here, go down to Transfer and click Grab Document. And there you go. Now we can see our little height map. It's generated a height map or a depth map based on our geometry. And all we need to do is export that sucker, and we'll call that ZGrab01 stitch. Watch me try to spell stitch brush, and we've exported it, right? Cool. Now, the other way that I mentioned, but we'll come back. I want to stay on point, so we'll come back to the alternate way, and that just to help us understand what's going on. But here's our image we've just exported from ZBrush. Let's take a look at that. There we go. So this thing is, sure enough, 3,000 pixels squared. There you go. So now it's beautiful too. Nice high res, and you can see how perfectly it's rendered out our geometry as a height map. So I just wanted to share with you kind of alternatively, if you do a BPR render, right? And this is useful for other things, so I'll show it to you, right? So if you go to render properties, and I'm just turning this stuff on just because I'm fussy, it's not necessary. This is not necessary for what we're doing. But I'll click BPR render. Phew, that took a minute because of the resolution. Now, the only reason I did this was just to kind of emphasize a point here. So we've already got our height map by grabbing the document under Alpha Transfer Document. But anyway, under the BPR render pass, you can export out the various channels that comprise the image. You've got your AO, shadows, subsurface scattering, mask, shaded, and the depth map, right? So the depth map is useful not only for making height maps, but for example, if you wanted depth of field effects, you wanted to have something that's further away from the camera be out of focus or vice versa. That's what this thing is useful for, and you can export individual maps. So we'll just do that. I'll just call it test. And going back into Photoshop, just to show you what we've got here. This is our depth map. So same thing. It's exactly the same thing, right? This is a perfect height map that we got out of BPR. So you could also create your, if you wanted to, you could create your stuff this way as well. It's just interesting to me that, and it illustrates the point that what's going on here is it's creating. ZBrush has what's called a depth cube, a Z buffer, and that's what's being used to create our alpha map over here. So when you go up to alpha, grab document, it's creating a height map. And cool, so let's just get rid of that. Sorry for the diversion. And now we have our little height map. All we need to do now is to create a tiling version of this. So, okay, so we've got our nice height map here, and now we want to make a tiling map out of it. So I'm actually going to sample an area that's this. We could get multiple maps, but I like the area kind of right around the center here that has a tighter detail, so not notice such bulbous kind of big fat details top and bottom. So I'll grab my marquee tool, and what we want is fixed ratio. So, and I'm gonna set this 1:1, right? And let's take, so I'm looking for an area, like, I want to get kind of halfway between one of the stitches, top and bottom, right? So we'll kind of eyeball this, and that looks like a pretty good
area, right? So I kind of have these details I want in similar areas, top and bottom, kind of right in the middle of the stitch. That should do nicely. So I will crop that sucker. I'm going to resize it to a nice 1024. I have my grid set up at 512 increments. So 1024 being twice 512. That means that I will be able to snap things easily. If I make a 2K page, I can snap this little map within that page to the grid, which is going to be helpful, right? So now we have a 1024 map. I'll copy this whole thing onto a new layer. And now we will resize our canvas so that it's a 2K map, right? Cool. Okay, so we've cropped the area of the map that we want, and now we need to make this thing tile. And I'm gonna show you my old school, more hacky way of doing this. Photoshop does have features to automate this, but in this case, it's a pretty simple thing. So the basic concept of tiling is that you want the top and bottom here, in this case, to meet. To do that, all we're going to do is take our original image, I'll duplicate that layer, and flip it vertically, right? So we just want this the bottom area here of the flipped image. So I will mask out the whole thing. Yeah, set this one to white, and I'll use a gradient, right? So just use a little gradient, white to black. Turn off snap for a minute. Yeah, it snaps off. Cool. So we're just going to mask that area out there. I will paint out the little bit of wonkiness with the stitch, right? And so all we're using is the bottom edge. And so now in theory that will tile, right? So this is our theoretically tiling piece. Let's just take the whole thing and once again snap it. So you can see it does tile, but you kind of see that hot spot right there where these pixels are mirrored. So to get around that issue, I will Control-Shift-E to screen grab the whole thing, and I'll use a little blur, right? So we'll just go up to blur, Gaussian blur, and blur the bejeebers out of it. Kind of got a radius of 20 here, right? Once again, masking everything out, and we'll just, along that edge, we'll just soften the whole thing by reintroducing that blur we just created, right? Control-Shift-E, delete. Control-Shift-Alt-E to screen grab the whole thing once again, and flipping that. Cool. So now we have something that should tile perfectly. If we repeat the process here with the gradient, and now this should be our final tiling map. If I duplicate that and move it up back into place, there you go. So much less noticeable seam. So there you go. That's tiling. That's our final tiling map. We'll take the whole thing and crop it down, and Bob's your auntie. The one final thought. I made a faux pas, an oversight when I was sculpting this. I made a valley over here on the left when I really want left and right. Remember this grade equals a height. So I want them to be equal. I don't want to have a valley kind of appearing on this side. That is easily fixed, right? So we'll just grab, come on baby, we'll grab that color, this gray value, fill the whole thing for a second, trusty mask, and trusty gradient, white to black, and let's shift to snap, and there you go. So that should do the job. And just to be safe, I'll kind of erase the center line out. That's good. That's it. So cool. So now left and right, same height, tiling top and bottom. We're good to go. We're going to save this thing, and one thing to note, it should be RGB, and I don't think ZBrush likes 16-bit, so change it to 8-bit and save this as, damn it, I'll pull this one brush. That's our final shebang. To ZBrush Batman. Okay, so here we are back in ZBrush with our trusty jacket as we left it off in last session. So now let's look at taking that bump map we've made and turning it into a useful brush, right? So first off, yeah, I've got a decent number of subdivision levels. I'll create a layer on our jacket, right? So we can, we can always go backwards if needed. Anywho, and I think definitely when you're doing stuff like bump maps and detailing, you're obviously going to want to have a layer. You're going to have the stuff on layers so you can always kind of tune it easily. Anywho, so the first thing is, of course, we're going to load the brush. We're going to go to the alpha field over here and find that brush we made, which I always bury deeply. Demo files here, and I made a slight tweak to it, so there it is. There's our brush with some slight tweaks. Same thing basically. There you go. Now, first I'm just going to kind of show you what it looks like without tuning. Right, so you've just got your brush default settings, and you try to put it on the jacket, and it looks horrible. It looks like a wound right now, right? Like it looks terrible. Okay, so first things first, let's undo that. And you're going to want to fix that. You're going to go up to the stroke here and down to curve, or actually modifiers, and turn on roll. What roll is going to do is it's going to allow us to tune the spacing a bit. So the default 1 turns out to be pretty good. So if I draw that, now it starts to look more like a little bit more reasonable. And undo. We'll dial up the size of the brush, right? Yeah, it's a little better. I can't really see the details very well, so I will try going to a roll of, let's say, 2. That might be a bit much, so we'll try, let's try like 1.2. Okay, that's a little better. All right, so we can kind of see our stitches, but it's a bit harsh, right? It's so let's turn down the intensity. Let's try 16. There we go. That's looking more like it, right? So it's starting to look more like stitches and creases and whatnot. Undo those last 2 strokes. Right, so we've got an intensity turned down a bit. We've got roll on and a roll distance. Over here under the alpha, modify. A couple of things I want to draw your attention to. The first is that sometimes you might find that when you're using bump maps, they have a tendency to distort the mesh. So to fix that, you can turn up the mid values a bit. Like I found a value of about 25 tends to be pretty good. And I think the other thing that's going to really help our stitches here is perhaps giving them a bit of blur, right? Let's try that. Let's see what we get now. Yeah. So now you'll notice with the blur, it's softening it out enough that you can actually, ironically, it's softening it, and now we can see our details much more accurately. That's more like what we want, right? So let's turn that off. So now I could hide, because remember we have polygroups on this sucker. So now let's give this a little go. So using our trusty new brush and come in here and start adding some stitch details. Yeah, like that.
So once we are happy with our settings and we've given our brush a bit of a test drive, all you need to do is save it. Now to save our brush, all you have to do is go up to the brush palette here and click Save As. Now you can put the brush anywhere you like, but just to FYI, if you wanted to load with ZBrush automatically, you go into Program Files, Pixel Logic, ZBrush, and you go to Z Startup, which is right here, and then you go down to Brush Presets and give your brush a name. Cool, so now your brush is saved. Right now it just has the icon for the standard brush. If you want to save that, if you wanted to change that, you just go up to Brush, select Icon, and in the same Z Startup brush presets, there is a brush icon sample. You can use that as your template. So I've made myself a really quick and dirty icon here. I'm going to load this, and there you go. So there's my icon, and I'll just save that once again. So this time it saves with the icon, and there we go, man. So now anytime I load ZBrush up, it's going to load up right here. You're going to see it in the menu, and it's going to have this icon, so it looks like something cool. Okay, so I'm going to do a bit of a Julia Child here. So this jacket is the jacket, a slightly different version than the one we've been looking at so far. It's the jacket I'm going to use for the final model, and the core difference is that the stitches themselves are separate geometry. I created an IMM brush, which I'll go over IMM brushes in the next episode, but I created an IMM brush for the stitches so that, for example, I could, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we can fill these guys, oopsie, wrong one. We can fill these guys with a color and then bake out an ID map, or just a mask for Substance Painter and give them a different material. But anywho, so therefore what I did was create in Photoshop. These are created the same way as the brush we made earlier, sculpted in ZBrush, and then we grabbed a depth map to generate these, and instead of stitches I got little holes to correspond with our modeled stitches. So what I'd like to do to wrap up the session is just kind of talk about some tips and kind of approach to applying these bump maps. So let's load our new brushes. In the brush tab here, we're going to click load brush and browse to here. Got A2, and same thing, I'm going to load one more here, B2. Cool. Okay, so here's the thing. So now our brushes appear up here. They're using the standard brush icon right now, but they are in fact our little stitch bump brushes. The very first thing that I recommend doing is storing a morph target. The reason for that is it's going to act as our eraser. So if I do something wonky, I don't like it, I can erase it. And then of course we're going to add a layer. Give it a second. Let's hide everything else we don't want to look at right now. And let's start with this one here. There you go. So okay, so I'm happily scrubbing along, and that's all good. By the way, there's something, so you'll notice I have the backside on here, and the brush is not affecting the backside of the surface. Now by default it would, but I had done something here. I've gone under the brush settings and I've turned on backface mask. So if I didn't have that on there, you'd get that. And that's another attribute you can save with your brush. Turn on backface masking there. But let's suppose that, oh shit, I don't really like that. Not a problem. So we're going to grab the morph target, the morph brush here that we just stored, and we're just going to erase that. And let's go back. Let's try this brush here. Oopsie, let's turn. There you go. So the other thing we can do with that morph target is blend brushes, right? So instead of just having the same brush kind of tiling down here, we can come back in after the fact and say, well, I'm gonna kind of swap it out here. I'm gonna take this area out and I'm gonna pick a different brush, and I'm gonna come in with this brush instead. Although that looks very much similar, so we'll try the other one. I'll just kind of dial up the size just to kind of let you see it here, right? So we can vary up the edge there by using the morph target. You can kind of lay in everything and then come back and add some variety that way. Cool. So as you guys, if you're watching the last episode, we built because we built this thing, we exported it out of Marvelous Designer in panels like this. One of the advantages of doing that is that, you know, at the moment they're not particularly visible, but if you come in with, like, for example, the inflate brush, let's say, where is that sucker? There's the inflate brush, and I'll mask this thing so you see what happens here. So I've noticed that, you know, on our actual jacket reference, that, you know, these edges are a bit hard. You can come in and give them a bit more volume, right? So come in around the edges here, and it might be a bit too much, but kind of just kind of puff them out a bit, and you can accentuate those seam lines, you know. So if I turn off the masking, you can see how we're popping that seam out a bit there, and giving a bit of a nice kind of a rounded, more natural looking edge. So yeah, you can run across all those panel lines with your inflate brush and just kind of accentuate them a bit, you know, give it a bit more drama. Alright, so just about done here. If you watched my episode on, the episodes on actually building this jacket in Marvelous Designer, you might remember that some of these panel lines are what we call internal lines. So it's not a physically separate mesh. The crease is created by an internal panel line, and to give that a little bit more plausibility, I've actually pinched this is a brush I acquired from somebody else. It's pretty simple, but it will add some nice little detail to that edge there. Let's make this a little bit more, let's try and make this a little bit more believable here. So we'll just run, see, kind of test it. That's a bit small. Dial up the size of that brush a little bit, and that's a bit exaggerated, but I kind of like that kind of stitching that's pulling, you know, kind of has a nice little detail to kind of accentuate that panel line there. It's kind of there, but it's needed a bit of help, if you know what I mean. It needed a bit of, you know, like that. Cool. And there you have it, you know. So yeah, takes, you know, a bit of patience, but it's a lot of fun adding these details. I'm definitely going to get into making more brushes in the future for myself, because I like doing this stuff. It's great. Gives the thing some life, you know. All right, now I think that will do it for brushes this week. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this little segment on bump apps. I wish I had some better examples. Like in the future, I'll probably do some creatures, and that would definitely be a good vehicle for bumps. But anywho, it's time for our Easter egg and some questions from you guys. And at the top of the list, Serena had asked me if I could do a lace-up dress, and thank you for that, Serena. And it got me thinking. So I'm gonna spend this next month just knocking this character out, getting it done, which will kind of free me up to kind of wrap up the YouTube videos on this particular series and do some new stuff. And we'll look at, so yes, we're going to look at Marvelous Designer. And anywho, so Serena got me thinking, lace up dress, you know, and this character I've been wanting to build. I showed you guys a sketch a few weeks back, and I thought this could be a good vehicle. Perhaps she's wearing this costume that could be ideal to maybe make the back of it kind of a lace-up dress, you know. So anywho, so that segues nicely into JD's question. So the really interesting question that I think JD asked, at least in my mind, is, you know, is basically, you know, what's the current game industry like and what's the future of the games industry? And I think, so that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about momentarily. But Serena's question about lace-up dress kind of segues nicely into another one of JD's ones, which was, you know, how do you learn new software? What do you do when you're having difficulty learning software? And so I'll admit that I have not made a lace-up dress before. I have some ideas about how I might approach it, but that's going to be a good project for me. Kind of in the process of building that, I will learn some stuff which I can then pass on to you guys. And that's my approach to learning software. You know, so the obvious, so JD's saying, what do you do when you have difficulty? Well, the obvious thing is that, yeah, you go to YouTube. I go to YouTube all the time. You know, like I'm making YouTube videos, and like the other day I needed to change the light bulb in my car, and I went to YouTube, and you know, that was great. So of course YouTube, Google, forums, you know, but I think the unique thing I would like to share with you guys is, like, when I want to learn something, I give myself a project, and that makes it fun, right? So when it's fun, when it's not just like, oh, okay, I got to learn this software and I'm going to go through all the tutorials, that can be tedious. At least for me it is. My personality is like, if I have something I want to do, like I want to make this character, and in order to make that character, I'm going to have to make a lace-up dress. And so to do that, I'm going to have to figure out how am I going to approach this, or how I'm going to have to learn how to do it, right? And so that gives, that motivation helps me. And what typically happens too is it kind of cuts through all the noise, you know, like I have a friend at work last year wanted to know about ZBrush, but he basically, his personality is that he wants to learn like every single kind of button and what's this do and what does that do, and that kind of baffles me a little bit, because for me, you know, what I find is, like, if you have a project, you're going to learn the meat. You're going to learn what you really need to know, and then it's going to snowball from there, right? So in giving yourself a project, you'll find like what it is about this program that it's going to be particularly useful, and then the other stuff you can kind of leave by the wayside. Or, you know, often, you know, I'm not shy about asking my friends too. Like when I was the lead at Telltale on the season 4, but you know, I recognize that, hey, my friend Becky over here, man, Becky's really good with X-Gen. She's really good with the hair. So I put my pride aside. I'm like, okay, I may be the lead, but I'm gonna go and I'm gonna say, hey, Becky, you know, you're really good at this stuff. Can you teach me? You know, so put your pride aside. If I don't think JD has, you know, that issue, but a lot of people do. You know, it's funny, like particularly, you know, people, often managers and stuff, for some reason they don't want to admit they don't know something, and you know, and that gets in your way. You know, it's so just be humble. Don't be afraid to ask people. You know, and you know, and that's my thing on learning software. So just a quick take on that. But so JD asked about the games industry, and so this is my take on the games industry. The games industry basically mirrors the film industry, except it's compressed, right? So the film industry is about over 100 years now. It's, you know, it really started at the beginning of last century, and you know, and I could say I got into the games industry about 20 years ago, which was, you know, you say it's about 30 years old. It's, you know, at the beginning of the film industry, there was very much fly by the seat of your pants. You got the impression that they kind of made stuff up as they went, and people would wear multiple hats, you know. the cameraman might be the effects artist and all in one. Or, the guy filming the movie might be basically figuring out how he's going to do the effects and filming and directing and writing and everything, and stars like Charlie Chaplin, they were not only were they the writer of the story, they were the actor, they were the stuntman, So that was the games industry when I got into it. So when I got into games, my first gig out of school was at a place called Totally Games, and I started on a game called X-Wing Alliance, which is basically kind of a flight simulator in space. And so George Lucas had approached Larry Holland because Larry Holland had made some World War II flight sims, and George thought, well, hey, that's perfect. He was basically inspired by the dogfight, films, World War II films, about aerial combat, and wanted, he instructed his kind of crew to kind of look at that stuff when they were designing the shots for the first Star Wars movie. And so Lucas comes to Larry Holland and says, can you make me a kind of an X-Wing game, like a flight sim in space? And so when I came on board, they were making X-Wing Alliance. It was hilarious because they didn't do characters, so they were really good at flight sims, but they didn't know anything about characters. And me and my buddies, we were that was our passion. We really wanted to be, kind of character illustrators, animators, and stuff. And so I saw an opportunity there. So we, talking about wearing multiple hats, we were texturing, modeling, storyboarding. We were doing the cinematics and the in-game stuff, and so the art team was charged with making the cinematics as well as the game itself, right? And initially they just wanted to do like kind of talking spaceships. If you can imagine this, they wanted to have like here's the Han Solo's kind of Millennium Falcon, and you would just hear the voices of the actors. And what I did, I went off on my own time, and I thought, hey, I'm gonna model the Emperor Palpatine because I wanted to do character stuff. I thought it's just really hokey just to have like talking spaceships. You can do that for 5 minutes, but not for the whole game, right? So I went off, so I modeled Emperor Palpatine and Luke Skywalker that way. It was super hacky. There was no skinning, so I literally kind of mashed the arms into each other and kind of disguised it with dark textures. And my boss saw that and said, great, let's do it. Let's use that. And that's how it was back then. No way now, right? There's no way that would happen now. So like I said, the games industry is like the film industry, but it's kind of compressed. So yeah, so the video games industry really mirrors the films industry, and they're very much converging. So if you want to understand the games industry, there's a wealth of videos and documentaries out there on YouTube, for example, showing the making of movies, and often they're very, very choreographed. But I found a few gems which kind of give you the nitty gritty of it. For example, I was watching a show on the making of Aliens, like James Cameron's sequel to the first Ridley Scott Aliens movie, and that, watching that, I really made me think of the games industry. And so I'll put some links at the end. I'll put some links in with this video, so if you guys are interested. Yeah. So in this one, so James Cameron, they're filming over in England, I think, and James Cameron, he's famous for being a hard driver. He's very passionate about what he's doing and really pushing people. But the funny thing is, like, these days, people in the games industry, and I guess in the movie industry as well now, are becoming much more kind of concerned about work-life balance. So we used to work, like I worked crazy hours on the first season 1 of Walking Dead, as I think I've mentioned before. But by season 4, everyone was like, no, we can't do that anymore. And so here's James Cameron, and he's trying to push everyone to kind of go a little bit further, make it a little bit better. And in England, they have unions, right? So the unions are saying, no, man, it's 5 o'clock. We've got to stop work now. You can't film a minute beyond 5 o'clock. So how things have changed, and so that's it's a good thing. It really is a good thing. But there you go. Yeah, like if you want some insight, actually watching some shows about movies and how they're made is great, because you don't really get that with games right now. but you do a lot with the movies. So I'd say check out some movies about making check out some shows about making movies. Anyway, so what about the future, right? So JD is saying, well, what's the future of the games industry? And that's dangerous territory, because anytime you try to predict the future, it often ends up completely the opposite of what you would imagine. I used to imagine, even working back at Totally Games, I thought surely, one day we'll just be cyber scanning everything and I'll be out of a job, but it didn't work out that way, Yeah, we do cyber scan stuff, but A, along came ZBrush, which made it a lot more efficient to organically model, and B, there's games like LA Noire out there where they use live actors and they cyber scan their faces and even capture animated kind of they do animated normal maps, but look at Overwatch. Look at there's definitely, just like the movies, right? Like in the movies, you can see how yes, they cyber scan stuff and they do all these things, but there's still like people want fantasy. They want to be taken away to another place, and so we love Overwatch, because it's stylized and it's pretty and it's an environment you want to spend time in. So I personally find that very encouraging. There's, and no matter how sophisticated software gets, so now we have Marvelous Designer, which helps us, make our costumes a lot quicker, and so you don't have to hand sculpt folds anymore. And I remember people actually, my colleagues lamenting because they like to sculpt folds, but I love. So now it's still a craft. There's still art. It's just a different art. Now you're a pattern maker, and I find that a lot of fun. Like, I think of making characters as it's a bit like making a doll. You make this doll that's articulated, and then you craft its costume and everything, and it's like a puppet. So it's sculpture, but it's also like puppetry. So sorry, I digress a bit there, but just to say that I think it doesn't. Here's the thing, even as things get more efficient, the more efficient we get at making stuff, the more that the creatives want. So the faster we can produce characters and the better quality. We have all the software to help us in that process. But then it's like, well, now we want more and more characters, which leads me to where I kind of feel like I don't think there's going to be any one path. But my personal thing that I want to see is sandboxes. Like, as a gamer, what I like is games like Red Dead Redemption and GTA. Not so much for the content, but for the freedom. I mean, I would love a kind of Ratchet and Clank, Overwatch style sandbox, like a world where I can just run around and do whatever I want. And I could see that being a much more of a thing in the future, like where right now things are very scripted. You have first person shooters where in that sense it's not scripted, but the gameplay itself is very kind of monochromatic. I'm not dissing shooters, but for me, I like the idea of an experience, and being able to customize your character. That seems like a no-brainer. That, as we get more sophisticated producing things, I think we're going to find ourselves producing maybe like the tools for the user to create their own experience. Wouldn't that be fantastic if you could just load up some software and make your own world and populate it with characters that you designed, and then just share it with your buddies? I think that would be fantastic, and I could see that becoming more of a thing in the future, like a much more organic gameplay. And before I rattle on too long, as an example, some technology that's been in the works for a while now, you've probably come across it in the games you play. Back at Insomniac, they were playing with the idea of auto-generated levels, which so you build the blocks, the basic kind of like traps and building blocks to create a level, but then at runtime, those blocks are assembled into a brand new level, and it's never the same, right? So instead of that groundhog scenario where every time you play through the level, it's the same thing, and you kind of, but after you've played it 3 or 4 times, maybe you get to the end because you figured it out. now you've got the ability to make a world that's always changing. It's never quite the same, and that could be exciting as well. But so there you go. There's my take, my rough pass on the games industry, and maybe more of that in the future. But I'll leave you guys with this. So one more question. It's actually a request from Rami, right? Rumi, from Rumi, and he'd asked me if I could model my favorite actress in the baseball outfit, baseball girl's outfit from the game Rules of Survival. So I don't have time to go off and model another character right now. So as a compromise, I did a concept, and I hope you liked it. I think he actually wanted me to model his favorite actress, but I interpreted it as mine. And my favorite actress is Helena Bonham Carter, right? I loved her ever since Room with a View. And Baseball Girl is kind of, she's a warrior with a baseball bat. But so I did a little bit of a tweak on it, and I'll leave you guys with this. Here is Helena Bonham Carter as Baseball Girl from Rules of Survival.